My mom, well, she's entrepreneurial and she's very hardworking and very perceptive. Like, she knows things about me that I never realized until now. I've had a desire to learn more things, which I think caused me to drift away from my Hindu traditions growing up, because I was just exposed to a lot more than my parents were, my grandparents were. And so I started reading it, and it said, the Baha'i faith is a world religion that believes in the unity of all religions, and they all come from the same God. And I was like, I think these people mean well, but I think they're wrong. Where I grew up, it just seemed like one religion is right and the rest must be wrong. Or they must all be wrong and there is no God. So I grew up in a Hindu family. I was born in New York City. Parents came from India and grandparents came from Pakistan. The partition of India, it caused them to flee, and also caused us to have a stronger bond to our Hindu traditions. So I was 11, and I remember I my family decided to go to Lotus Temple because, you know, it's a cool thing to do on a Saturday afternoon. And so we got there, and this was back in 2007. And I remember, you know, like, we went there, and I remember I was like, this place is beautiful. Especially, I like how it's shaped like a lotus, and, you know, like the inside, like there's all these, it feels kind of like a mosque, but also kind of like a temple, a Hindu temple. So I wonder who created this structure. And I took a pamphlet from like the entrance, and it said, Introduction to the Baha'i Faith. And I was like, Baha'i what? And so I started reading it, and it said, the Baha'i Faith is a world religion that believes in the unity of all religions, and they all come from the same God. And I was like, okay, I think these people mean well, but I think they're wrong. They're just flat out wrong. Because how could the religions agree with each other? Especially where I grew up, it just seemed like one religion is right and the rest must be wrong. Or they must all be wrong and there is no God. Later, I read, and then it said, the Baha'is believe that they all come from the same God, and that humanity, the unity of humanity, and that humanity is united by all these religions. And I was just like, really? Who are these people? What are they smoking? The last thing I read was, it was started in the 19th century in Persia by a guy named Baha'u'llah. And I was like, okay, I feel like these guys are Sufis and they must be really cool people, and clearly they've just spread around the world, and clearly they're pretty good at making gardens and building temples. But I don't think there's much to this religion that I'm interested in. Growing up in America, surrounded by mostly non-Indian people, there was a struggle to balance these traditions that my family grew up with and would do, like for instance, touching the feet of our elders, not eating meat on Tuesdays and Fridays, and worshiping different idols, like especially Ganesh. The thing is, like, I was actually an atheist for most of my childhood. I mean, there were periods that I would just like be like, you know what, there is no God, and what's the point of all this? And my mom is like, well, you don't have to believe it personally, but you still have to go along with it until you're old enough to leave the house. So when I went to college about 8 years later, this was in 2015, I was speaking at an interfaith event on behalf of a secular group called the Campus Freethinkers. And I remember, like, after I spoke, the Baha'is of Georgia Tech, the specific chapter, they showed up, and one of them, and then they started speaking, and they started talking about how they believe in the harmony of science and religion, and how, like, they're both two wings of the same bird. Without one cannot fly. And that was the metaphor that they said this guy Abdu'l-Baha talked about, and how if there's something in religion that contradicts science, then it's superstition and should be discarded. And then I remember, oh yeah, these are the same Baha'is that I visited their lotus temple a while back. And, oh, that's cool, but that seems still like something that still seems really out there. How could science and religion ever hope to agree? I went to Christian gatherings, Muslim gatherings, Buddhist gatherings, even some Jewish ones. And I was like, you know, maybe there's some way all of these faiths tied together in a framework that makes sense. Three years later, I was just looking at meetup.com because I was bored and looking for something to do that day. And I remember that I found an event for that later that afternoon, like in like a few hours, and it said, "The Coming of Age of Humanity, the Forces of Unity versus Disunity." And I was like, okay, now this title, wow, this title really caught my attention. So I clicked on the event, and then it was by the Baha'is of Milton. So right away I was like, you know, as I had been searching for the past few years and trying different things out here and there, I was like, you know, let me look into what these Baha'is are doing. And so I was interested in like connecting with the Baha'is, and this was the perfect opportunity, and it was only 20 minutes away from my house. Yeah, and as I scrolled down through it, like the description just gave like this mystical yet very optimistic view of humanity's future. So I drove over, and it was in the library, and there was like 20 other people there. So right away I was like, this is some good turnout, and we're gonna have some good discussion. And I remember the organizer, Riaz, he started out with a group of quotes from the Baha'i writings, along with some other quotes from different spiritual sources, talking about the forces of unity and disunity, and how the forces of disunity are just destroying this current world order, sweeping it away, and then the forces of unity are creating a new world order, one based on love, the oneness of humanity, unity, peace, respect for others, and justice, among, you know, other spiritual virtues. When the Baha'is were talking about this new world order as just coming together organically, especially in part because of just the way humanity as a whole is coming of age and starting to let go of these immature disagreements and wars and conflicts. And I thought, wow, I love how they're not afraid to just say New World Order. It gave me a lot of hope, especially in a time when I felt divided and torn. And after that meeting, I walked up to Riaz and I was just like, I joked, "So you Baha'is want to take over the world, huh?" And Riaz was like, "No, we want to peacefully bring mankind together." And I was like, "Oh, so peacefully take over the world? I'm down with that. Where do I begin?" And he's like, "Well, if you want to learn more about the Baha'i faith, I'll be happy to teach you. And we can meet at Starbucks within the next week." And I was like, "Let's do it." So we exchanged contact and then we started meeting. I met with Riaz a couple times and we talked about the basic teachings of the faith. And he was like, "All right, well, I'm going to give you this book that is the story of Baha'u'llah, but also covers pretty much the entire history of the faith." And so I took the book and then I started devouring it. As I read more about the history of the Bab and the story of the faith and how much persecution it met and the heroic martyrdoms of the faith, of many of the figures, it brought tears to my eyes. I decided to become Baha'i after a long period of searching. And I think that what really led to it was a period of profound questioning and soul searching. I remember I was surprised at how easy it was to enroll. I remember like, "Oh yeah, all you have to do is just go online," Riaz said, and fill out this online form. And I was like, "Oh cool," so I did that. Honestly, I couldn't find any real reason to not be a Baha'i, so especially logically, so I turned to it. And then I became Baha'i in July of 2018. So my parents, at first they were like, "Oh, this must be a cult. And like, how'd you hear about this?" And I'm like, "Mom, remember visiting the Lotus Temple in New Delhi years ago?" And she's like, "Yeah, we did that, but see, that was just like an afterthought." And I was like, and she was like, "Well, but like, why do you need religion? Why do you need to follow something?" Honestly, and to this day, I still go back and forth on this with her, with other people, with myself. I think it's because, honestly, I'm an imperfect person, and if nothing else, I look at the example of Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, and the Bab. Abdul Baha says, "Shun the company of the worldly and instead associate with the spiritual and detached, like people who are spiritual and detached from the things of God." But honestly, at the time, the material things like the parties, the drugs, and the flirtations and frivolous things that this all amounted to seemed to be very appealing. And I remember the pinnacle of it all was when I met my friend Carrie, somebody who just denied God, seemed like a cool guy, seemed like he really wanted me to go live life to the fullest, enjoy every moment. And so I unfortunately fell for his trickery. And I did things I'm not proud of. And I became a person that I would go back home and my mom would be like, "What happened to you? Are you even still Baha'i?" And I would like, I'm trying to balance being Baha'i with just, the reality, like material things. When this past summer, I met some new Baha'is, younger, closer to me in age, reconnect and study the writings, and slowly I've just made connection with them and exposed me to sort of like what it's like to be, the very meaning of being spiritual but not religious. Having the right characteristics of peace, love, unity, respect, and justice, and but also realizing just how committed and sincere their beliefs are, whether it's in Reiki healing or reincarnation or magic, like, or just, you know, dancing, even just dancing on the beach. And also their belief that we can build a new world based on loving each other and respect for the environment caused me to start reappreciating that in the Baha'i teachings. It gave me a stronger basis in just like more spiritual and a more stronger spiritual foundation as opposed to just the intellectual foundation that my Baha'i faith had been built on. I think that it's helped me to, as a Baha'i, to move on and heal when you realize that by letting go of the past, you're better able to move forward. So my parents got divorced and then my dad remarried, and he was managing his wife's boutique out in New Delhi. But then the pandemic hit and he came to America looking for some new opportunities. And so we've had the chance to reconnect after a long and difficult relationship and period between us. And to that I thank Baha'u'llah for making me see and move past my parents' individual troubles. I could sort of detach and view the facts. No matter what your past is, as long as your heart is searching, the answer will come to you like a breeze.